these Dionysian mysteries, were they thought to have been coexisting around the time of the early Christians in the Greek-speaking Roman Empire?
That's my whole thesis, is that, you know, I don't think that the world went to bed in 33 AD as Greek pagans and woke up in 34 as a bunch of Christians. The thing that unites these two worlds is magical wine. I mentioned a little while ago that if you really do read the Gospels, and if you read the Gospel of John in particular, he is talking about nothing else but an immortality potion. You know, the blood of Jesus is the thing that makes you immortal. It's pretty clear in John 6:53 to 56. Just look at the Greek there. And so it's not unusual that a few years later, right around the same time, Ignatius of Antioch, for example, writes a letter to the Ephesians, and he refers to the Eucharist as nothing less than the pharmakon athanasias, the drug of immortality, right? The pharmakon, like pharmacy. Wine was universally described as a pharmakon for centuries and centuries, from as far back as Homer, 8th, 7th centuries BC, to the fall of the Roman Empire, with Christianity right there in the middle, where you have church fathers referring to the Eucharist as the drug of immortality. It doesn't take too much to put two and two together. So I look at this tradition as something that could have survived from the Greek pagan world. Not to say that there was psychedelic wine at the Last Supper. That is well besides the point. And what I'm investigating in the book is the possibility that some of these early Greek-speaking communities around the Mediterranean could have availed themselves of what to them would have made sense, and would have made sense to their ancestors, which is to say, the kind of spiked wine that produces ecstasy. At what scale, where, and when, I don't know. We are just beginning to piece these details together because, frankly, no one was looking at this stuff from a properly scientific vantage until very, very recently.
Right. And then there's this link between Jesus and Dionysus, right? So you have the idea that Dionysus, you know, may been this kind of this cult around spiked wines, and then you have these Greek speakers and people like John writing to the Ephesians, trying to basically convince them to join up to this new religion, and kind of pretty intentionally sending signals that like there's continuity here from the practices that you love with Dionysus through to this new Jesus figure.
I think, yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters. And again, this is not my idea. I'm picking up on where people smarter and crazier than me have picked up. So Dennis MacDonald, who's a fairly respected biblical scholar, wrote this book only a couple of years ago called The Dionysian Gospel. And it's the fact that John's gospel in particular, which we know is very weird and very different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptics, John uses this language that is very strange, quite frankly. And, you know, he uses these symbols that are only found in his gospel, like the famous water to wine miracle at Cana. We think of it as one of these trademark Jesus miracles. It only occurs in John. It's in fact the first miracle in John. Dennis MacDonald and others would refer to that as the signature miracle, quote unquote, of none other than Dionysus. The concept of water changing to wine was not born in 33 AD or 30 AD. It goes back centuries to all these traditions in the Greek world, like in the district of Elis on the Peloponnese. There was this tradition recorded by the ancient sources of the priests leaving these water basins in the temple of Dionysus on the Epiphany, no less, January 5th, returning the next day and finding it miraculously transformed to wine on the very same Epiphany that the church today now celebrates as the coming out of Jesus, this epiphania, his appearance, his godhood, becoming manifest by this great water to wine miracle. And clearly John is saying, this is a kind of Dionysus. Don't think of Jesus as this foreign Son of God. This is the same Son of God that you've heard stories about for centuries. In fact, the first line of Euripides the Bacchae that I mentioned, Dionysus is referred to as Pais Dios, the Son of God. These are not new ideas in the first century AD. I think what was new, and I think very interesting to think about, is how these mysteries would have been received by these folks, because Dionysus, unlike the mysteries at Eleusis, is seen as kind of a monopoly buster. He's out there democratizing this sacrament, and instead of this beer that's locked up in Eleusis for 2,000 years, the followers of Dionysus are drinking their wine in these outdoor churches, in the forests and mountains of Greece and elsewhere around the ancient Mediterranean. Now here comes Jesus, not only democratizing the same sacrament, right? I mean, the wedding at Cana is a bunch of drunk people getting drunker, right? It's the miracle isn't the beginning of the wedding, it's the end of the wedding. So here's this great wine god, letting the wine flow as much as can be, 180 gallons no less, to a bunch of drunk people. And what's the message? The message is that these wine mysteries are surviving. And here's Jesus inviting it not just to the forests and the mountains, not just breaking it out of the temple, but inviting it into people's homes, into these private parties, first at the wedding at Cana, and then at the famous Last Supper. Jesus is saying this is the kind of thing that can be celebrated at home. And so the mysteries go from the temple to the kitchen, where anybody can access this very sacred tradition. It's a really interesting idea.